Okay. Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you all for joining us today for our panel discussion on rethinking the basics of insurance and a deep dive into blockchain to build the industry of the future. Today, we'll discuss with two startups, MAPay and Attestiv, how they're leveraging blockchain technology to redefine the approach to the huge data-driven pain points in the insurance industry to deliver improved efficiency, better security, reduced friction, and ultimately better business models. So basically, transformation. So let me kick this off with just a really brief intro on me, Jackie Shoback, and then just a few points of context setting about digital identity, blockchain, and why it matters. And then we'll get right into our panel with these two amazing rock star panelists that we have here today. So just a real quick intro on me. I'm Jackie Shoback. I'm a 25-year C-suite executive with experience launching and scaling businesses from 50 million in revenue to over $1 billion at firms like Staples, Fidelity, and TIAA. Most recently, I was at Boston Private, where I held a few different C-suite roles, including divisional CEO of emerging businesses, where I oversaw emerging businesses, operations, and technology. And then about a year and a half ago, I left the corporate world to start a venture capital firm. I'm a co-founder of a VC firm, 1414 Ventures, focused on early stage investing, so pre-seed and seed, in the digital identity sector. I'm also on the board of CUNA Mutual Group, a large mutually owned insurance company. So today's topic is very, very near and dear to my heart. And so before we launch into the panel, I'd like to just set a little bit of context on digital identity, its connection to blockchain, and then we can just start discussing with our panelists, Nicos Vekiarides from Attestiv and Michael Dershem from MAPay, on what they're doing and how they're using blockchain to transform insurance. So in my world of digital identity, our definition, just so everybody has like the same working definition, it's really the credentials or transactional data that gets captured, shared, and stored for an individual, an entity, or a device to verify or authorize a transaction or interaction. So in the data economy, this is a $610 billion market, and it really is the key underpinning to business models and an enabler for security, privacy, and trust and information flow. Blockchain is one of the submarkets within my definition of digital identity. Just to frame it, it's a $5.5 billion market, and it's growing at a 55% CAGR. So let me just repeat that, 55% CAGR, which is amazing. And with the acceleration of all things digital and the explosion of interactions, underlying processes and enablers need to change, creating the perfect timing for blockchain and its application in insurance. So as I mentioned, today I'm joined by two panelists, these rock stars, Nicos Vekiarides and Michael Dershem. Let's go ahead and start off with our panel. And I'm going to start off by asking each one of them. Michael, we'll start with you, just to briefly introduce yourselves and tell us what your firm does.
Thank you, Jackie, and thank you, Boston, and thank you, FinTech Boston, for the invitation. Looking forward to having a lively discussion this morning. Again, Michael Dershem, CEO of MAPay. My background, dissimilar to Jackie, I've been in startups all my business career. For the past 25 plus years, have been building businesses in the greater pharma and healthcare space. Touched everything from distribution to operations. I was one of the first movers in alternative site clinics, so putting docs and nurses in places like Walmarts and grocery stores when people thought that was crazy. And now when you look at it, that's the front line of getting our jabs, which is pretty interesting. I was also the founding CEO of Pharmaset, which was the hepatitis C startup out of Emory University. We brought that together. We raised millions of dollars in private equity, and then eventually went public at about a $250 million valuation, ultimately sold to Gilead for close to 11 billion. And that's the drugs on the market, Harvoni and Sovaldi, that for all intents and purposes are eradicating hepatitis C around the globe. So we thought for our next trick, we would take on the $10.2 trillion of healthcare spend globally, which, as everybody knows, even as a patient or that's totally dysfunctional as it relates to the payments and interoperability of data. And I'll touch on that and our impact that we're doing not only domestically, but also globally. And then some of our vision around collapsing the entire friction, in the healthcare payment and data arena.
Awesome. Nicos, you want to take a few minutes?
Sure. Thanks, Jackie. And I'm excited to be here today. So I'm Nicos Vekiarides. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Attestiv. My background has been largely as an entrepreneur here in the Boston area over the last 20 years. I've started a couple of companies with some of the colleagues that I've worked with, largely in B2B IT space. We did data storage management. We also did delivering cloud storage to the enterprise. Both of those companies were sold, one to Hewlett Packard and one to EMC Data Storage before Dell acquired them. So this is my third go around as an entrepreneur. And having been in the data storage and the cybersecurity space, one of the holes that we saw emerging is really around the authenticity of data. It's become, you've probably heard of deep fakes. You probably see them more in the social media world, but it's a problem when you can create synthetic media and essentially fake reality. And what we've done is we've built a platform that's a solution to this problem, and it applies to insurance, really companies that make decisions on a daily basis based on photos, videos, and digital documents. Happy to tell you more how we solve that problem. And of course, blockchain is a key piece of our solution.
That's great. So wow, the two of you, serial entrepreneurs, amazing exits to huge companies, huge brands. Maybe we can step back a little bit. What I'd love to do is, and Michael, we'll go back to you. Maybe just take a couple minutes and really frame up, why did you start this company, after all the other successes you had? Why did you start this? What problem are you solving in particular? And then maybe just get a little bit into who you're selling to, because I know insurance, we have many different stakeholders. So maybe you can talk a little bit about who you're actually selling to and what benefits. Maybe talk about what benefits you're explicitly looking to deliver.
Yeah, for sure, Jackie. So, like I spoke about earlier, when we look at healthcare and the cost associated with healthcare, let's take for example in the U.S. we have about $3.2 trillion worth of healthcare spend, and believe it or not, to move that money between providers, payers, patients, third-party administrators, the friction around that movement, that velocity, can be upwards to 20% of the cost of care. That's an incredible statistic. And so, when you roll that back, that means that there's, close to $600 billion worth of what we look at collapsible cost. And how we do that is we work with, when we look at that ecosystem and you have third-party administrators, you have billing companies, you have overhead inside, you have just regular flow of dollars associated with that. We look to collapse the cost of that by bringing efficiencies throughout all of that. And then our vision. So we say publicly that we can reduce it by about 50%. And then we look at, once we are able to deploy in a totally digital arena, utilizing smart contracts and blockchain, we believe we can get that probably down even closer to 90% reduction.
Wow.
And so at the end of the day, and maybe this is our punchline and I should have saved it for later, but when you look at what we can do by just reducing that friction, that frees up a lot of dollars that we can go for orphan drug research, vaccines in underserved areas. And I think at the end of the day, our business model and our philosophy, those are the things that drive us every day to get to those types of outcomes.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Nicos, can you comment, sort of same questions? Would you mind commenting, please?
Sure. So we're focused on selling our solutions to the insurance space, and in particular, our customers consist of insurance carriers, third-party administrators, particularly claims processors, as well as MGAs, typically who are more involved in the underwriting process that can often involve things such as inspections. And the benefits we deliver are really based on, as a starting point, if we take P&C, property and casualty alone, there's $40 billion annually in fraud in the United States. That's a really big number. And what we do is we enable these companies to create a digital media intake process for photos, videos, documents, anything that has to do with your claim, that is fraud resilient, it's consistent, and it's sustainable into the future. So if you think about it, it used to just be the Photoshops. You could take images and Photoshop them, but now you can go to websites where you can create synthetic images of whatever you want and essentially paint your own reality. So this is a problem that doesn't just exist in some senses today, but it's a problem that can get worse in the future. So what we do is we help provide a layer of protection against this type of fraud. It's not all the types of fraud, obviously, but media can tell you a lot about the quality of the claim. And then on the other side, what we find in practice is about 10 to 15% of these digital media items come in with some sort of anomaly. But the other benefit is the 90% that don't. Now you have the assurance that these are actually validated. There is nothing wrong with them, and you can proceed with confidence with automation, straight through processing. And essentially you start saving on your cost per claim, whether it's a few $100s per claim by having a desk adjuster instead of an in-person adjuster. We can enable all of that savings as well.
It's amazing. These numbers are staggering. Switching gears just a little bit, maybe if you could comment, Michael, we'll go back to you. If you could comment, blockchain. So just talk a little bit about why you chose it, how you're using it, and why it seems to be like the right enabler for the problem that you're solving.
So, we look at it, from, healthcare data is, really, one of the most important pieces of data that I think everybody would agree to. That PHA, that personal healthcare information is like, the holy grail. But we go at it in a little bit different than to try to bring interoperability to the industry. Interoperability is the idea that, my data should be able to be shared, across, whatever doctor's office, hospital, insurance carrier, government, that I should be able to have access to that across any of those, any of those stakeholders. The issue is, and I talk about this all the time, the issue to me is not a technology one as it relates to interoperability. It's a business. We have, this personal health information is locked up in insurers, is locked up in hospital systems, is locked up in other electronic health records, is locked up in government payers. And those players are competitive. One insurance company, it just is not going to put on their platform an API to allow everybody to, access to that data. But what's centric to it is the patient or the consumer. So how are we able to provide a bridge, knowing that the affinity of my healthcare data is me? And so what we did was we started at the payment. We started at the payment, which attached to that is the clinical data, which rolls up to why that payment is going to be made. So what does that mean in blockchain sense, and why do I bring that up in context? Because where blockchain, it enables us then, and we talk about it in a real basic sense. We're not giving, like in today's world, we're not giving people keys to the entire candy store. If one of the major kind of publications, digital publications out there in healthcare is Becker's. Every day, you see another hack, you see another ransomware on every type of healthcare, whether it's provider, insurer, system breaches. It's incredible. So what we do, instead of giving keys to the candy store, what blockchain allows us to do in a permissionable way, provide somebody, let's take, for instance, my data. I am able to give that in a permissioned way back to a certain doctor. So following the candy store, I'm able to give that permission to go on this shelf 2 boxes over to the Mounds bar for a certain period of time under certain conditions, and then take that permission away. That's what it allows us to do, and put it on different nodes, which then allows, for better protection of the data. Mm-hmm. But hopefully, Jackie, that gives you a sense for, why it's necessary, and what the pitfalls have been historically, business as well as technology, and what we're doing to try to solve that.
Yep. No, makes perfect sense. Maybe Nicos, you can comment too on the, your usage, if you will, why blockchain for this digital media, and, the application of it to insurance. Maybe you can just comment on that.
Sure. And we use blockchain. We started using blockchain early on, and we use it for tamper proofing. So essentially, the idea is when you're taking photos, whoever you may be with your phone, what we do is we fingerprint images, videos, or any documents that you capture, and we fingerprint them to the blockchain at the instant that they're captured. And what that creates is this chain of custody, which means we can track whether that item has changed or been edited or altered in any way from that point forward. But we do that without storing that item on the blockchain, because the fingerprint is, think of it as a digital cipher that it maps to the time, date, location, and perhaps the contents of the photo, but there's no way you can go back to those items. So it's very secure. But the idea is that with this ledger, we can provide this tamper-proofing for things such as claims. Perhaps you have inspections during the point of underwriting that you want to be done. And we can make those processes they can be self-service, so they can be the actual images can come from a variety of stakeholders in the ecosystem. So it can be self-service process run by the insured. It can be an agent. It can be somebody from the carrier. It can be an adjuster. It can be an independent adjuster. It can be a third-party administrator. It can even be from maybe a first-line responder, and you have accident photos. But regardless, using this system, now this whole ecosystem has this level of trust where anybody with the Attestiv product can now validate these photos to ensure that they're valid, that they're in their original form, nothing has been changed. So that's kind of where blockchain comes into play, is we have the ecosystem, we want to establish trust, and with that, we can enable trust everywhere, even in the hands of the insured, which creates a lot of efficiencies for the insurance while stopping fraud.
That's great. Nicos, maybe building on that a little bit, can you maybe walk us through, just so people can really visualize this in a very practical way, can you maybe walk through a use case, or like, I don't know if it's confidential, but maybe even like a company you're working with or a use case. And also, I happen to recall you guys are also using AI. I'd love for you to just comment about the use case, but then also maybe a little bit about how the AI fits into that.
Yeah, so the AI is very complementary. So essentially, when you're doing things like tamper-proofing images, there are still things that can go wrong, right? You can take your phone and aim it at your screen and take a photo off of your screen. You can have a very low quality photo that maybe is trying to obscure something. So we apply 6 models, most of them, some of them AI, some of them rule-based, but essentially to ensure that the photos are legitimate, aside from the fact that we know where they were taken and that the pixels in the photo are legitimate. Also, sort of the context is legitimate as well. So, there's some interesting things that can happen, like if you, for some reason, there's an accident claim, an auto accident, and there's photos from 4 different types of cameras. That's a little bit of an anomaly, right? It's why were so many cameras used to take photos of a vehicle? So there are various ways where that plays into sort of enhancing the output that we can bring. A good example of this is ACD. They're an auto claims TPA, and they're a customer of ours. And what they do is they work with body shops, with auto body shops, to retrieve the car photos, and oftentimes these go back to insurance carriers, whether it's because there was more damage found, additional damage found, or simply to settle and close the claim. So what we've done with them is we've given them a process that's far more consistent. It's repeatable. There's some interesting habits sometimes that we were able to break. Sometimes folks think it's okay to take a photo of a picture because it's on their screen, even though as opposed to an original photo. But it's not always, doesn't always mean it's fraudulent. But getting these high quality photos is what we've done. And for ACD, we've also given them sort of a higher quality stream of data for their carriers, as well as the ability to proactively correct any anomalies that they find in the claim. So in many cases, if it's sort of the problem is a little bit benign, but it's still a low quality photo, like they're all blurred, they can come in and very easily, just in real time, the users get a request to take another photo.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Just out of curiosity, with the implementation of your technology, your solution into their whole, workflow, if you will, did it end up for ACD? Did it end up leading to other insights and improvements that they never would have found if they hadn't implemented
you brought to them?
Yeah, I think that's exactly the case. It happens with, I'll move to more generally. It happens with every customer that we find some anomalies that they never knew existed, right? Another, let's say, unnamed customer, we found a large number of photos were processed, and in that processing, they can lose key data like the time, date, and location, which is very important that you want to have in the photos, whether it's for the current analysis or perhaps you want to run analysis at a later time offline to better understand, which claims are good and which ones are problematic, and perhaps adapt to that.
Great. Michael, if you could walk us through a use case and sort of same thing, the use case itself, and then just it would be great to know if there were any interesting learnings, insights as a result of your technology, your solution being implemented.
Yeah, for sure. So I think what's interesting about MAPay is that we talk, especially as we're looking at the marketplace, we've deployed what we refer to as today's tech or T-Tech, and then with a true vision and involvement into digital and D-Tech. But we had to be able to provide, solutions to these use cases in what I would refer to as today's tech and regular fiat, as we move and evolve into D-Tech. So during the initial stages of the pandemic, everybody, every doctor's office, every hospital, every provider, or even insurance care, were moving to telehealth, right? And so this was it was an industry that was, or part of the industry that was ramping up, but the pandemic really accelerated that. So now imagine every doctor's office, every hospital turning the switch on in a day to telehealth. So not only did they have to have the tech involved, but they also had to have, the clinical process and the payment process. As you had patients now sitting at home, doctors sitting at most of the time at home, or nurse practitioners, and you also had staff working at home. And so that quagmire and that process flow. So here's an interesting use case. So one of the largest mental health telehealth companies in the country, they were a consultant that was working on their business model as this was, as this explosion was going on. They saw that their insurance side revenue was hockey sticking, but their patient side revenue was relatively flat. And when they looked at it, they saw that their present credit card processor wasn't, the way that they were doing the patient engagement was like this. They would do a patient intake form online. Mm-hmm. They would then, schedule the appointment. And here's another interesting piece, Jackie, is that medical commerce is different than any other type of commerce. And what I mean by that is, if I go on Amazon and I buy something today, my credit card's looked at, well, it's good, the transaction goes through. In medical commerce, I've engaged that practice in this telehealth experience. I've scheduled that appointment. Maybe that's 4 days out. And then when do I certify that payment can go through? So here's what was happening. So you have you have somebody calling in for depression, and right before their appointment, they had a staff person come on and say, could I have your insurance card and credit card? Right? The VP said it like this to me. So what we did was we moved that up the food chain to where it should be. Just like when you enter a doctor's office, that's when you get it, right?
Right.
So at time of appointment, we're able to certify the insurance as well as the patient side responsibility for the payment. The difference in that, from a patient engagement standpoint, the VP of this mental health company, said to me, she said, Michael, this is what we used to do. So you have the staff person right before they're ready to see the doctor, asking for a credit card. We were literally saying, please put down that gun and get your credit card out. She said, what you did for us, you changed the entire dynamic of our business. Not only did our, payments and revenue go up, decrease in payable, outstanding, but our patient engagement went up exponential. And to me, when she said that to me, to us, sometimes we just think it's, this stuff is child's play. Doesn't everybody think that way? Right? Well, obviously not. So what we're able to do is at time of appointment, what we call tokenize a payment. Mm-hmm. We ping that to see and certify that that's good. And at time of payment, at time of appointment, we can then, ping and, after the and have the payment go through. But so for us, just by making that change in the process, we were able to satisfy not only a business need, a technology need, but probably impacted the clinical outcome of that patient, which is critical.
Yeah.
So, those are the types of things. And I know we were going to get into this a little bit later, but, these are things that COVID has really kind of, things that were, a little bit of a gap have now busted out as a big chasm. And I think, when the story's written, some of the things that we might have been ahead of the industry, now have been able to say, yeah, we can adopt that and we need to adopt that.
Right. Right. Hey, we got a question from the audience, and I just want to weave that in. And so, Michael, I'll start with you. And the question is, how do you see these technologies impacting consumers? So maybe you can just talk a little bit and certainly quantify it if you can, just how you're seeing it affect consumers in terms of cost, engagement, et cetera.
Yeah. I see, on the consumer side, on the patient side, as it relates to healthcare, you see, even looking at your own, family's healthcare bills. I mean, it's dysfunctional. I mean, if I look at our family, I get bills from the orthopedics, the pediatricians, OB-GYN, heart doc, everything. And you can't make heads or tails of anything. What we're able to do on the consumer side is to be able to put that into one payment mechanism so that the patient can make any of their payments to any doc on one platform, and the network is smart enough to drop that at these disparate providers. Looking at what we're doing on the insurance side and on the payer side, if we're able to collapse the cost associated with the movement of that money, we believe that will, result in lower, potentially lower premiums, lower deductibles, which has a positive impact then on the consumer.
Right. No, that's great. Nicos, can you comment on that too, about the consumer and how you see the impact playing out?
Sure. I think it boils down to trust and convenience. So if you have, if you have something that doesn't qualify as a major claim, typically the process might be to send an adjuster into your house. And by having that trust and convenience where you can do this, you can go through the process as a self-service on your phone, I think creates a much better model for the customer, for the insured. You don't have to schedule. You don't have to wait. You don't have to worry about, oh, who's this random person coming into my home? Everybody get their masks on, whatever the case may be in a time of COVID. So I think the instant gratification part is really this convenience, and then over time, there are definite cost savings in being able to do things this way, which hopefully will also be passed along to the consumer.
Right. And Nicos, presumably, because of the convenience, because of the speed, presumably you're going to get your payment from your insurance provider faster, right?
Absolutely. I think that's the goal with straight through processing, particularly for claims that are not very controversial.
Right.
That process can be automated entirely.
Just out of curiosity, have you been able to, do you know, like the cycle time, how much you've collapsed it? Like, is it hours? Is it days? Is it weeks? Do you have any metric on that?
Well, that answer is it depends. I mean, certainly claims can be very complex, and typically they're put into buckets. But if it's a very broad-based, simple claim, it can be a matter of minutes or hours versus days or weeks.
Days or weeks. Okay, that's pretty compelling. Another question for you, Nicos, again, this from the audience. Where do you see opportunities for FinTech entrepreneurs wanting to get into this space? I know this was something we all said we would actually talk about later, but since it came up, I thought I'd throw that out. So Nicos, maybe you want to respond to that?
Well, certainly. I mean, if we're talking about the whole blockchain ecosystem space, I think there's a lot of opportunities, and you're seeing a lot of disruption. I mean, I think one of the analogies I'll make is back in my last company, we were really pushing the cloud, and we were talking to a lot of these enterprise organizations, and it was. And they were just thinking, well, should I use the cloud? Can I trust the cloud? Should I even bother with this? Am I going to lose my job as a result of this? So a lot of them were slow movers, and what we saw is companies that were so-called born in the cloud suddenly taking off and eating their lunch, and it's something that's also bound to happen in other industries. So sort of. When you're native blockchain, when you're building an application or a solution that's native blockchain, you do get all of these advantages. You get the trust, you get the automation. Sometimes the decentralization helps with opportunities such as DeFi, so long as you can avoid the regulation hurdles that do exist, because if you're looking at regulated industries, but again, for that, I always use the example of Uber, which walked into a huge brick wall regulated industry and completely disrupted it. And I think that's what we're going to be seeing here as a result of DeFi and blockchain in various financial services and insurance.
Michael, can you comment on that as well?
Yeah, I mean, I see a lot of opportunity within the healthcare and greater pharma space. I mean, the different business models that FinTech can bring and DeFi can bring. We even look at things like clinical trials. We look at things like there's a phrase out there called value-based arrangements, where you're paid, you're paid based on the value of that drug or that clinician brought to the table. Did it work in its most basic sense? So, I look at the way that healthcare is funded, through insurance companies and through employers. Is there a way to, disrupt that? So I think there's an incredible opportunities. One of the things that we do is we're able to sit with folks in the C-suite and talk to them about what pieces of the business, and we use this term, what has always been nutty to you, and what have you been able to fix? And it's incredible that that I think a lot of times right now, folks don't even know where to begin. And I think that gets us into the room to then, provide, kind of, business acumen and credibility in the space where once they open up, we're able to design some solutions. So, I'm very, if I was, young guy, young gal, looking at this, even building out new business models and financial models, in the greater healthcare and pharma space, I think, there's great opportunity.
Great. Nicos, can you maybe comment a little bit? I know both of you actually use Algorand. Maybe we could switch gears and just comment a little bit on like how you ended up in this ecosystem and just talk a little bit about the partnership there and sort of how that works and how it's enabled you.
Yeah, we started off blockchain agnostic, and in reality, we still are. So the thought was we would work with the best of breed blockchains, and we started off with Ethereum, and we went and we looked at some others similar. But what we found first of all is from a technology standpoint, we're processing literally millions of transactions for each carrier, and then you can think about how this adds up as we scale. So something like Ethereum simply doesn't have the transactional throughput or the cost metrics, the economics, in order to make this feasible. Sort of the third thing that we ran into was, well, gosh, there's no real the governance. They could fork one day, and suddenly we're chasing that and figuring out where do we keep our data. So as we started looking, we thought the obvious answer might have been these private consortium ledgers, but then the problem there was you have these distributed ledgers, and but if there's no adoption, then the consensus model doesn't work too well, and if the adoption is going to be in 5 or 10 years, we're not really going to have much of a business aside from evangelizing. So that's where we came across Algorand. They happen to be a local company, but they really have all of the attributes. They have great adoption on their blockchain. The transaction throughput is thousands of transactions per second. The economics make complete sense. They keep our costs down, and we can pass that along to our clients. They have the governance and the support of a local company here in Boston. So it was it became a no-brainer after a while, and we partnered with them. But they also, they've taken a keen interest in the insurance market and have been a partner with us as we approach insurance carriers. And oftentimes, what we've seen is a varying level of proficiency of, some carriers want the blockchain 101, and some, have already started using it for things like subrogation or maybe reinsurers paying money, tokenizing money that goes between reinsurers and insurers. So it's just such a varying level of proficiency, but they've been a great partner to come in and not only help us sell, but also help educate.
Great. And Michael, how about you? Tell us a little bit about your journey and how you ended up with Algorand, and just how you're working within the ecosystem.
Yeah, and I think I would echo from a technical standpoint everything that Nicos said about Algorand and kind of our pathway, looking at other platforms. But I think our relationship, when I look at what we're doing with Algorand and any strategic partnerships that we have as a business, the technology is one thing, but I think it's where we have total alignment is also at the senior level. The philosophies that we have, the character that we've been able to bring on both sides, right? That's key to building successful deployment, whether it's in the domestically or what we're doing with them and have announced globally. So I can't say enough about where their vision and their creativity around what now we are bringing jointly, that says to me as much as the technology alignment. And that's I think what for instance, the CEO of Algorand and I were at speaking to I'll keep it confidential, the country, but as we were able to sit there with the premier of the country and provide our vision and what we could do today and where we believe we can take this country. It was remarkable how we were able to just speak in tandem.
So Michael, so that's a great springboard. We're going to switch gears just a little bit, but a question from the audience came through about how blockchain. So I don't know if the story you were starting to describe, but how blockchain can actually help expand the availability of insurance to underserved communities. So whether it's your current business or just your experience in using this blockchain, I'd love to have each of you comment about that question. How can we use this technology of blockchain to actually really help the financially vulnerable and extend into these underserved communities? So maybe Michael, why don't you start off?
Yeah, we're going to be announcing probably within the next 2 or 3 weeks within one country how we're driving the ability to bring together a better service and payment model and clinical outcome model for their indigent care, right? And Jackie, I it's been my business career. Like I look at some of these things, I'm like, that is just crazy, Nope. And I don't want to say this in full, but at the end of the day, do people sitting on their care about the indigent care, right? But we do, and countries do, and those families do. So what we're going to, again, some of this is our own IP, but what we're going to be able to do is not only provide a better payment rail for that indigent care,
right,
but we'll also be able to provide the clinical attributes around it, which then allows for metering of adherence and compliance. Did that indigent care get that prescription? Did they go to that doctor? And do it on blockchain through NFTs, which is a game changer, is a world changer.
It sounds like it's not just accessibility, but it's also like ensuring the delivery is executed and happens, which is great.
Yeah, assuring that compliance and adherence is key to better outcomes.
That's great. That's great. Nicos, can you comment from your experience and just broadly with blockchain, if there's your point of view on this?
Sure. I mean, directly applicable to what we do. I mean, you have to think of hurricanes that occur, and there's a lot of underserved areas in terms of, just trying to find adjusters and others to go out there and survey the damage. And by creating this convenience and trust, you give everybody the opportunity to simply start getting these claims processed in a way that, assuming that, things the entire house hasn't blown away and, you're left out. But if it's something that can be done reasonably in a self-service manner through an inspection, it's something that we can do and help settle these claims a lot faster. Which is very critical for people who are, who have been hit hard by by these storms and such, and are just stuck waiting.
Right.
And oftentimes, it could take months for the right people to get there under the circumstances. So that's just one example, but it sort of really consumerizes the whole notion of insurance and makes it much more accessible.
Right. Just out of curiosity, so this last hurricane, I think it was, gosh, it's so hard to keep track of them. There's so many. Maybe it was Ida.
Ida.
Yeah. I think it was Ida. So, so have you seen, like, I guess, do you see like your usage like surge when there's some kind of catastrophe like that? And do you see it like you're sort of saying, like right in those hard hit, communities that really have no other alternative to get the info?
Yeah, I mean, usage certainly does go up. I mean, and down depending on certainly, on the automobile side, it certainly went down at the beginning of COVID, but it does, it does certainly come in surges. There's no question that, the claims happen in surges like that, and typically they are around events like you mentioned, the hurricane.
Okay, so I know we have about 9 minutes or so left. So I know I have some other questions I want to ask these guys, but I am going to ask one of the questions that came from our audience about switching gears just a little bit here around, it's interesting. Both of you are talking about the trust and the transparency, right? Which is a key dimension, if you will, to blockchain technology, right? Trust, transparency, and accessibility. In traditional insurance, right, is very, there's a lot of distrust from the consumers, if you will. And so how do you think about, just in your experience and as you've been ramping up your own companies, how do you think about consumer adoption and the reception of blockchain within insurance and how it's being used there? Like any insights to share on that question about consumer adoption, and consumer, I guess, really being, by the end user, but also by the companies who are implementing your technologies.
Well, I mean, yeah. So a lot of it is sitting behind the scenes. So it's not necessarily. I mean, what you're seeing is more convenience. What you're seeing is a higher degree of trust. So that helps in many ways. I think sort of a bad experience is when it takes a claim forever to to actually be resolved by an insurance company, and it's being able to bring that speed helps in many ways. Typically, it's no one will sell this to a consumer as a blockchain solution, right?
Right.
It's sort of when we switched, everything was on the internet. We weren't selling the internet. We were just selling, hey, you can just go to Amazon.
Right.
Stuff.
So,
and I think it's sort of the same way. It's a little behind the scenes. I mean, I think there's some models that are emerging that, sort of the resurgence of maybe peer-to-peer models where you say, hey, you know what, we're gonna build a consortium of people that are going to be self-insured or so forth. That does run into regulatory hurdles.
Right.
But there are sort of ways to think about creating a decentralized model. I'll leave it at that because it does get complicated, but there is some future there.
Right. So your point being, which is a great point, in fact, blockchain, which is behind the scenes, if anything, invisible to the end consumer, might actually be a way to bust the distrust and increase trust because it's speeding things up and it's making it just more convenient, easier, more transparent. Michael, any comments there?
Yeah, I would agree. So my wife, who is not a techie, she'll say to me, but Michael, when will I know that blockchain is, I'm walking down the street and all of a sudden I get hit by blockchain, right? And I'm like, sweetie, it's like Nicos was saying, it's underneath, and so I say to her, I say, remember the days, in your email, like we don't know what all the packet switching and all that stuff that's going on. We just know now that I can schedule an appointment with Jackie, regardless of who she had, and it shows up on my calendar, her calendar, all good. Right. And I think so I think for the consumer, as insurance companies, government payers, and providers are utilizing some of the attributes of blockchain and distributed ledger.
Right.
They'll see the outcome, and there's really no need for that. They'll see the benefits of those, but there's really no need for them to really understand this underlying technology.
Right. Okay. So I know we've only got just a couple minutes left, and so I'm going to go ahead. Let's limit this to 60 seconds or less. So real quick, and Michael, I'll start with you. What's the one piece of advice you'd have for an entrepreneur looking to use blockchain to solve a problem going forward? Like, just from your learnings, what's the one piece of advice if they were venturing out?
My piece of advice is that business models and business plans are dynamic, right? Understand what the problem is that you're going to solve, but also be able to evolve with that. And I think evolve with the technology that even when I look back, what we've been doing over the last 4 years at MAPay, did some of these things, like even what we're doing globally, we were able to, to have our business model evolve with the technology.
Got it.
And I think that's important for any entrepreneur.
Got it. That's great. How about you, Nicos? What's your one piece of advice for this budding entrepreneur?
Well, for entrepreneurs, blockchain is such an exciting technology because it can solve so many problems. But on the other hand, kind of getting to the specific solution that you're delivering and really featuring that, because again, blockchain is something that's behind the scenes. Ultimately, you're delivering a solution that solves a problem. So try not to get too caught up in the gears behind the scenes and focus really on the solution. And in a case like ours, we have to combine it with AI in order to provide a complete solution. So ultimately, our customers are buying the solution.
Okay, so we probably got like 20 seconds for each of you. So a prediction. So Nicos, I'm going to go right to you. Given what you've done thus far and what you know, what's the one prediction you'd like to make about blockchain or insurance that you'd like to share with this group?
I think you'll see a lot more blockchain native companies, and I think you'll see them popping up in insurance. They'll be disruptive. They'll have lower costs. They'll have the trust problem solved, less fraud. So I think exciting times ahead.
Blockchain native. Got it. Okay. Michael, literally 20 seconds. What's the one prediction?
I think those that, continue to bring value will continue to have a seat at the table, but those that won't will be disrupted.
Got it. So a survival of the fittest, sussing out of what's really going to add value versus not. Okay. Well, with that, thank you for joining me here today, Michael and Nicos. This was a great discussion. I hope the audience got some really good insights. I know that I did, and I look forward to staying in touch with both of you as you tackle these amazing problems in insurance with this amazing technology of blockchain. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Jackie.
Thanks, Jackie.